Hi, I'm Vanessa Worthington from Art of Floating here in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, and here I have Ken Kaplan from Quantum Floats from New Jersey.
Yes, you do have me here.
Yeah, thank you for making the drive.
Thanks for having me out.
Yeah, I heard it was your birthday yesterday.
You did. How did you hear that?
Well, I don't know if it was Facebook or just because I know you and I knew it was your birthday. And today you arrived with a cake. Why did you arrive with a cake?
Because it's my birthday.
It is your birthday. That's right.
Yeah. Did you get me a cake?
No, I didn't. I forgot.
That's why I arrived with a cake.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's why I love you, Ken. I mean, you're so spontaneous.
Well, it's the day after my birthday. But when
Okay.
you're 56, you got to make these count and even last a little longer.
And you have to celebrate with a cake everywhere you go.
So it's like, I got to bring something, right? Because you're at someone else's house and it's nice and polite and thing to do. And I always like it. I know that you do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, birthday cake. Not just any birthday cake, a birthday cake celebrating my birthday.
Yeah, why
Thank you.
celebrate me if we can celebrate you?
Well, why make this day about you?
Exactly.
Why it could be about me.
That's perfect.
All right?
Well,
Yeah.
this is my friend Ken, by the way. So, I know you. Art of Floating knows you. But people that are listening to us, they probably don't know you. And a lot of people always, when they come and float or when they know me or something, they're like, why do you open a float center? So you being my guest, I wanted to ask you, you started as a lawyer, now you have a float center,
Okay.
and now you open a bigger float center. So tell us a little bit about that.
Could we clear maybe an elephant in the room before we do that?
Oh, definitely. I love clearing elephants.
I don't think you liked me that much when you first met me.
I didn't. No.
How come?
I don't know. It was just, I mean, it's really hard not to like people, but yeah, it's just
I did a pretty good job at
You
that.
did a really
Yeah,
good job
I was,
about, I remember
Yeah.
you going to my house back in Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, it was very just, I want to say superficial.
Yeah, I get that.
I'm nice, but I have a smile.
I look back and I just grimace at like going through life and thinking I'm so super cool, only to find out that, wow, the reality of what I was doing was way different than what I thought about. And that took a lot of, let's just say, third party, people on the outside, plus me listening to get the point that what I was doing was different than what I thought I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I thank you for the help in making me hopefully slightly more tolerable to the world. Thanks.
Well, that's what friends are for, though. If you're not going to point out those, the good and the bad and the ugly, then,
Yeah, but kidding aside, somewhat like that has a lot to do with going from lawyer, which I've been for 30 years, to now lawyer, still a lawyer, but one that owns a float center. Mm-hmm. Because like once I started to get a peek at like what was under the hood and how I was behaving, then I didn't like it really so much, not at all. And then I started to see that.
So what didn't you like? Let me interrupt you there,
Okay.
because
So there were like fights everywhere.
okay.
And so around the time that I started to float was around the time that I really started to see that I wasn't getting along with my law partners, and wasn't really getting along with my wife either. And those were just my most intimate relationships.
You're close by people.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But the same things that were going on in there, I was able to see in all my other relationships. Except that it wasn't like it was about me. I always thought the common denominator was about them. So it was like,
I think we covered a little bit about that last week with the.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yep. So here I am 25 years as a lawyer, and noticing that things keep showing up in my life, like the same kinds of fights, the same kinds of arguments, the same places of button heads with people. And then just I found someone who introduced me to floating, and I went in a float tank, and there is nothing you can do in a float tank other than consider thoughts. That's it. That's it. So I found myself alone, really, for not, I wouldn't say for the first time, but in a really, because we're always alone with our thoughts in that sense, but in a float tank, we're alone without any of the stuff that can distract us. There's nobody on the outside. So over time, I floated once, I floated twice. I was like, wow, there's really something to this. I'm really getting to see some things about what I do. That I'd never gotten to see before, because there was just more clarity of not having the distractions of the outside world. And some of the things started to become clear to me. And it was that I was floating, but it was also that I was talking to people about what I saw from floating. Because because I got some insights that maybe I wasn't as super cool and the greatest kind of friend in the world, I really needed to check that and to say, I'm starting to think that, I mean, literally it came down to this. Like, I would be like, I'm starting to think that maybe I'm the common denominator of what's going on in my life. That was like, for me, that was like a thought that like was like a, what do they call it? Like a double-edged sword, in one sense, like I was bummed because like, if I'm the common denominator, that means like everything that I've done about blaming everybody else can't really be there. The flip side of that was that, okay, if I'm the common denominator, then that's awesome, because that means for the first time ever, I realized that if this is going to change and things are going to get better, it really starts with me. Okay.
So would you say that you started to recognize those patterns or that stuff that you started to do, that you were the common how do you
denominator?
Say that? Yep, denominator. Was it just because you started to float and people were pointing out, like, how did people start pointing these things out? Was where did that start?
So they were always pointing it out.
Okay.
There were always signs. There's always signs if you pay attention on the outside world to what's going on in your thinking. One way I can say that is, if you want to know what somebody thinks or what somebody really believes, I mean in kind of the deepest sense of belief, just look up look at what shows up in their world. Look at what's reality they create. Don't listen. Take my word for it. If you want.
No, yeah.
Don't listen to what they say. Watch what shows up.
Yeah.
If you watch what shows up. So for me, yeah, as I looked around, I saw the attributes and incidents and tentacles of all sorts of things that, were not really to my liking. Like fights with my partners meant that the business, my law firm, wasn't going well at the time, or at least as well as it could have. Marriage counseling at home was another kind of incident to that, and there were lots of others.
Okay. So when did you decide to open a float center?
So I started to float in 2010 or 11, which was a year that just absolutely rocked me. My dad died that year suddenly from stage 4 lung cancer. I have 4 kids. The 2 older ones were getting ready to go to college at that point, so I had all the stuff that comes on a parent has to deal with when they're trying to get their kids in college and figure out how to pay for it.
I haven't gotten there, so I don't know.
Okay, you will. Yeah, it's.
I can imagine, though.
Yeah, it's slightly more than dance school.
Okay. I mean, dance school does take a lot of time.
Yeah. And then, like my wife would say too, it was rocky there for a while. Like, we were going through marriage counseling, trying to figure stuff out. It wasn't like the first float or the second or the third, but somewhere in the first year that I started to float, I was introduced to my own thoughts, or not just my own thoughts, but really a way to understand my own thoughts, right? Because those really go together. Like if you don't, if you think that everything's woo-woo, then you don't have a language really. So I came across a book called The Office of Shaman, and I read it, and I remember sitting in my living room, and my wife's kind of listening from the other room, and I'm literally screaming out, "Holy shit! This is exactly." Because at that point in my life, I was already reading everything I could, both on like a science side and on even a metaphysical side, and this brought it all together for me. I didn't know what the hell it was really. I mean, it was interesting and stuff, and I got some of it, but I didn't got other parts of it. And
so what was the holy shit part?
The holy shit part was that I had always been interested in like what the neuroscience was saying about how everything we do, or mostly everything, is below the level of awareness, right? Everybody who reads neuroscience now is introduced to that.
Yes.
And like everybody, I nodded my head, but just like everybody, it didn't apply to me, right? And let me say that a little differently. Yeah, that's true for everybody else, but for me, that's not true. What I see out of these eyes, or think I see, is the God's honest truth.
Yes.
So I thought, right? So that was it. Like everybody gets the neuroscience, everybody nods their head just like I did. But seeing it for myself was a whole like slap in the face kind of wake up call. Okay. What was the other part of that question?
It was so people started to show you how you were doing stuff, and then why did you, like, what was the main factor that you opened your float center? So you started floating.
Kind of like the holy shit part.
Yeah, the holy.
Yep.
The book,
yes, right.
Sorry.
So part of it was like the neuroscience part, and then the other side was that always had an interest in reading I don't know what you would call it, like inner work, metaphysical kind of stuff, and authors like Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra and things like that were always of like interest to me.
Yeah.
And I'd find myself like reading a hard science book, which I love, quantum physics, and I was
quantum floats.
Pre-met quantum floats.
Yeah.
Like I was a science student at NYU even before I decided to go to law school. And then so I'd go back and forth, and I started to see the connections that it was really saying the same thing. That you'd have like the neuroscientists talking about how like we're more than just our bodies, and things like have an energetic factor to it, and from a kind of a quantum point of view, that's absolutely true. And then I'd read another book, and they wouldn't come from the physics side, but they would come from more like a spiritual side.
Yep.
And say that. So I started to see the connections. For me, I'd say the Office of Shaman probably was the place where it was like the most impactful to me to say, yes, this is it. I'm seeing the science. I'm seeing the stuff that's more about spirit on the other side, and here they are meeting together in this one practical playbook about how thought works. But the part that interests me wasn't so much that it was a practical book, but that it was like, yeah, that's why I do this. That's why these patterns are happening. Now I could see why I'm getting into these fights. Now I could see where I could be a better dad, a better husband, a better lawyer. From somewhere around there, I don't know exactly when that was born, was like, float center. This would be a really good thing, because New Jersey back at that point, we didn't have anything. There was not many places to float. I don't think there was a float center at that time.
Yeah, I don't think at that time in the world was not like it had started to pop up, the float centers. I think around that time.
Yeah, this was before even you guys were open.
Okay.
New York had one. California, I understood, had a few, and there were some smatterings of float places around.
Yes, I remember. So how so we're talking about how like you opened a float center, you saw these patterns and everything, but what did you do to see these things? Like, so what did how we met were through our seminars, workshops that we offer here at our both float centers. But how did you get involved in that? Like, what, out of curiosity, like what made you just want to take the workshop and say, yeah, I'll
Yeah, it's a it's like I think back to my mentor in the law business. There is an attorney named Joel Jacobson, and Joel Jacobson, and I want to say took me under his wing when I first started at my first real corporate law job, but it didn't always look like that. Because really he kicked my ass. He absolutely did. Like one of the first weeks that I'm a young 25-year-old lawyer, he calls me into his office, shuts the door, and just like, if this, he pulls out a document that I drafted and said, this, I can't show this to the client. What am I going to do? You spend 8 hours on this. He said, if this ever happens, again, this will be your last week. And I'm
honest with you.
I'm downplaying it. That was what they call ripping, like a new thing.
Yeah.
Didn't like it very much. Not at all. But yeah.
What did you like about it?
I didn't like that that somebody was basically rubbing my nose in something that I was dead to rights in. Like there was no I did that. You're right.
Yeah.
I even knew on that project that I was all over the place. I had spent too much time on it. I didn't know what I was doing, and he called me out on it. But there was something about being called out on my own stuff that didn't have like warm fuzzies for me. But I'll tell you that over time, now that guy and I are, that's my closest mentor friend in the law. Of the people that I've ran into, that dude took time to actually tell me what was going on.
So you liked his honesty.
I liked his honesty.
Okay.
Same experiences happened when I met the guy that wrote The Office of Shaman, John Worthington, because all of a sudden now I had now two places, my Joel Jacobson and then John Worthington, both taking the time to point out to me things that I couldn't really see in myself, because nobody can see what they're looking with. Let me say it a different way. You can't see the color of your own eyes. So even though, as we said before, that the neuroscience says that the things we do come from below the level of consciousness, and people below the level of awareness, people aren't aware of it. Everybody thinks that they've got a dead-on, honest, 100% true beat of what they're going on. They don't. And I didn't too. I fall in just with everybody else. So having a second set of eyes, somebody that really pays you the courtesy of saying, hey, what's that thing that you do? And really taking the time for it. I've only gotten, I can count the people in my life that do that on maybe just one hand. But that very much challenged for me my definition of friend and caring about it, because Ken Kaplan didn't ever do that. I would be a polite wink and smile, patch on the back and saying, you're doing great.
Yeah.
But
in reality, you didn't think you were doing.
I was lying to people, and it was part of what we said before that. The things that other people saw about me that just were like, oh man, I was an asshole, With
I can do a similar example at when, kids, for instance, when you give a kid a lay of discipline, that kid will respect you more because you gave them that discipline. And even if, a lot of people are like, oh, you can't yell, you can't do that or anything. But I've seen that when you do put that foundation down for kids and you have that discipline and you don't put that discipline down, those kids respect you even more because you were hard on them.
Exactly.
I've seen it in my kids, a coach that actually takes the time to, tell them where they're erring, they appreciate more than the one that just, you're doing a good job, and, the kid knows that they're not doing a good job. Why? Because he's not on the court,
Yep.
So.
And it's safe too, where you stand with people like that. I know it's unpopular too, because I've lived in corporate America for 30 years, and yet I still see corporate America is still pretty much today where it was when I started 30 years ago. I've been with public companies and private companies and law firms, and have seen thousands, if not tens of thousands of people laid off without ever really being given a chance to address the behavior, just like quiet of the night, pink slip kind of thing.
We'll fire you before we address what you're doing.
Yeah, because people
that
think...
person is just like that.
Well, yeah, that's where people think there's this taboo area where you
Yeah.
can't go. So for me, the Float Center business was a place where no, I'm going to pay forward what Jacobson and Worthington did to me, and have a place where people can where I give the trust out, and it's a safe place where people, but like no bullshit, you know. If
What I see is what
yeah,
I say.
you need that third set of eyes.
Yeah.
So I'm like the third set of eyes now. There's no special skill set in that, although you know you can hone that skill set and paying attention to it. I mean, but I make this point to people that there's really nothing special about what I'm doing that they can't do, other than that I'm saying things that I see and checking with them to see that they see it too. I'm not lecturing and saying I see you do that. You know,
Yeah,
like
no.
it's more like what's that about?
Yeah.
And seeing if they can pull it out themselves and see it for the
And
first
see-
time.
Exactly.
That's
because-
what it's about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point when you say that. Like, you're not lecturing them; you're just pointing at something that they're doing.
Believe me, I put myself on the 3-year self-appointed lecture circuit once I started to learn this. Let's call this skill programming, or
Okay.
let's because that's a good way to call it, or neural programming, rewire. There's a lot of things you can call
Yeah.
it. But when I first started to learn the skill, I was like, I'm going to tell people about programming, and
Oh,
then I went
yeah.
on the lecture circuit.
I'm
and,
going to explain
yeah,
programming to
tell
everybody.
you about all your bad programming.
Yeah, because I'm
Yeah.
Mr. Ken Kaplan.
Do you think I was successful in that?
I don't think so.
Yeah, not really so much.
Yeah, I don't think people think
It
that's
wasn't-
really
yeah.
appealing.
No, yeah, they didn't. I found out I was giving lectures on a daily basis on my own scheduling.
Okay.
Mostly to my family and partners. Yeah.
So they
were
didn't
not-
think that was
Nah,
right.
yeah, there was not.
No.
Yeah, that didn't resonate with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that. I mean, I've been accused of the same thing because I want to explain something or lecture something, and it's not so, you know, you can't really have someone see what they're doing when you're lecturing.
Yeah, it's true.
So it's, you know, or explaining, you know, it's like
Yeah.
you have to. That
Exactly.
person has to have the experience, you know.
So wouldn't you know it that the same thing I was doing, everybody else does. No big deal. We all do it. And in particular, I got a way to look at the law practice that they never teach you in law school or business schools or undergrad or when you're a practicing lawyer. Not just a thing about business that's minor to the business, but a thing about business that's like right down to the freaking core. And that is that the success or failure of a business depends mostly on the thoughts that are in the business. I'd even say entirely on it. People won't accept that generally. Generally, when I go around and meet lawyers and meet some people, they're like, it's tough out there.
You know,
Good employees are hard to find.
you say that, and it reminds me of a good book, and I think both of us have read it. Principles from Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio has the same method of thinking in that, and he explains it in his book how the thought of the company is what is
Yep.
running, you know, and,
Yep.
and he calls it his principles, and
Yep.
so he deals with the behavior in his company instead
Yep.
of the person, and I think he has like a mistake book.
Yeah.
I think that's what he calls it, and
Yeah.
you can't make a mistake twice, you know.
Yeah.
So you put it down, and you say how you saw it, and then you move on, you know. But that's a learning curve too, you know. And I think-
Dalio runs Bridgewater Hedge Fund, the I think most successful hedge fund in the world.
Yeah.
He runs it on a principle which he I think calls radical transparency.
Yep.
And he facilitates, if not insists, on a culture in his business where people say what's on their mind. Doesn't mean that what's on their mind is always in fact, we know from what I said
Yeah.
before that.
I mean, we know where he's coming
Right.
from that because like we've gone through that.
But
you
that's a start, right?
Yeah.
So if you have people that are doing that in a company, which, as I said, in all the layoffs to tens of thousands, that never happened in any of the other companies I was at. You just would get fired. Nobody
Yeah.
would ever talk to you.
Yeah.
So I can see where Dalio, why he has a hedge fund that is second to none.
Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
he's addressing those issues that corporate America doesn't want to.
Yep.
You say. Yeah.
So bad behavior and law practice and lawyers in business. That's
That's what.
where I now do two things: resolve a legal issue, but also able to talk to clients about why this thing keeps happening, or talk to them about why is this thing keep happening. Because if nothing else, the law is patterns. When you're in corporate America and you're in a corporate law firm and you represent companies, sometimes you have relationships with companies that have been with the same law firm for 100 years or 10 years or decades. And what you start to see is that the same things come up again and again and again. Things like, oh, you fired another CEO. Well, that one didn't work out either. Or, oh, that partnership didn't work out again, so you're closing this business and starting another one. Okay. So as a lawyer, most lawyers are like, cha-ching. You know, it's another billing event because, you know, in 2 years down the road, you're going to get the same thing happening again. Meh, no, that's not what I'm aiming at, you know, because I can see for me where people have paid me the courtesy to see the pattern that led to that. So, yeah. You know, that I figure is in short supply in the law and in business. And it's where I'm aiming. My float center is out in New Jersey, and we're aiming at the business market, which sounds kind of strange because the float industry in general doesn't really aim to corporate America. But for me, it's like I'm in corporate America. I'm like, these dudes need this.
Yeah. Yep. Need to float. Yep. So, well, that's good. So it's safe to say that you started your float center because you wanted to make a change in where your expertise is as a lawyer and how it has helped you with your partners, your lawyer friends, and your family, because you are also a family man and have kids, and one of them does dance all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. So she's preparing you for college.
She's so cute. I can't remember her name.
Jaden.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah. I call it a cute one.
Okay.
Hopefully
remember
she doesn't
her
see
name.
this. Yeah.
No. I hope so too.
Well, when you get to 4 kids, you know, she's like, hey, what's the cute one?
All your kids are cute.
Thank you.
Yes, they are. All of them. And they're very awesome too. So, well, I mean, I think that you've covered a lot of why you opened a float center and what the float center has helped you see and go through. So I appreciate you for your time.
Thanks.
Again.
I appreciate you having me here, inviting me here to celebrate my birthday.
Yeah, and thank you for the cake that you brought.
It's easy to do.
Yeah.
Celebrate my birthday. Why not?
Yeah. With everybody around you. Yeah.
Thanks.
So,
appreciate it.
Yeah. So thank you so much, and I will see you soon, and keep on talking about how beyond floating, what is the beyond floating, and how floating is not just one thing.
There's more.
Yep.
That's it. More. That's what. That's what we're doing.
And if you guys want to purchase the Office of Shaman, it's on Amazon or at either of our float centers.
Okay. Come into my float center and buy it on Amazon.
Yep. Either way. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Vanessa.
And cut.